In order to understand the impact of Confucianism and Taoism philosophies, it is important to examine the Chinese views about the origins of the Chinese civilization. During the imperial period, many Chinese believed in the Great Man theory, which explained how their civilization may have developed. This theory was based on the assumption that extraordinary people, rather than gods, were the reason for China's success and transformation into a civilized community. This may provide credence to the theory that Confucius and his philosophy, along with Lao Tzu's Taoism, were instrumental in formulating China as a distinct cultural entity. The answer to the question of in what ways were Confucianism and Taoism light within the chaos is linked with the broader issue of what changed chaotic China into a more settled society. A key factor was the emergence of more harmonious attitudes to social and political relationships, and this attitudinal shift is directly linked with the widespread communal adoption of Confucian and Taoist philosophies. To understand the significance of Confucianism, it needs to be seen in the political and social context of the time. Ancient China was moving in the direction of developing a structured and hierarchical society, whose people would be ruled by an emperor and joined by a feudal system of social organization. But at times this feudal social structure broke down and social and economic chaos resulted. Confucianism and Taoism emerged in such a period of chaos and uncertainty. Before Confucius, the Shang dynasty dominated northern China from 1766 BC until 1122 BC. It was a well-developed semi-feudal society that was agriculturally based. By 1122 BC, a less sophisticated Chinese race called the Chao gained control over the Shang Empire and maintained control until 1771, when the Chao royal family was overthrown and the Chao dynasty moved eastward, having lost much of its power. This fall of the Chao Empire hallowed a period of social change and chaos due to the power struggle between kingdoms, where feudal order and traditional loyalties disintegrated, while cities and urban civilization advanced. Throughout this time of change, Chinese history has been divided into two periods: the Spring and Autumn period that began in 722 and ended in 481 BC, and the Warring States period that lasted from 403 BC until 221 BC. The Warring States period was a time of continuous warfare and associated famine and high mortality rates, along with the rapid decay of the Eastern Chao dynasty, where it was finally conquered in 256 BC by the western state of Qin. Throughout these two periods, people began to question the cause of such chaos, and hoped for a better, more humane society. Although not significantly acknowledged in his own lifetime, Confucius, who lived from 551 to 479 BC, was one of the men whose philosophies offered an alternative to constant social struggle. Confucianism and Taoism may have originated at different times, but both became popular during the same period, the 100 Schools of Thought. Confucianism developed from ideas originated by Confucius, who followed a basic hierarchy of relationships where parents were superior to children, men to women, and rulers to subjects, in order to organize a more stable society. Confucius stated that the ideal person was one of good moral character and followed values that included respect for one's parents, ruler, and government. As quoted by Confucius, consideration for others is the basis of a good life and a good society. The ideal person was expected to think for oneself, lead by distinct rules of manner, and to establish one's own role in society by conforming to that socially accepted role. As Confucius said, he was expected to take as much trouble to discover what was right as lesser men to take to discover what will pay. After Confucius's death, the Warring States period began, where four of the most influential schools of thought developed, namely Confucianism, Taoism, Mohism, and legalism. This philosophically fertile period of the 100 Schools of Thought demonstrated the intense efforts to survive the chaos and warfare that the rising landed class and slaveholder class went to. The schools of thought saw philosophers travelling around China promulgating their ideas and teachings to lords and groups of people. At the same time, cities were becoming more advanced, with money circulating, Chinese calligraphy, and the first canals being built. Confucius' disciples recorded his teachings, conversations, and discourses in the Analects while Confucius was alive. After his death, Confucianism was carried on by his disciples, where two major schools of Confucian thought emerged. One was represented by Mencius, who was around from 371 to 289 BC, who continued the ethical teachings of Confucius' morality principles and enlightened society with the teachings of the philosophy of natural goodness in human nature, along with promoting a better policy needed for a good government, where he evidently founded an idealistic doctrine. He whose goodness is part of himself is what is called a real man, Mencius quoted. The other Confucian-inspired approach opposed many of Mencius's ideas and was promoted by Sun Zi, who was around from 313 BC to 238 BC. During his life, he built a structured system upon the idea that human beings were fundamentally bad and had to be educated and exposed to their rights, before being able to express their goodness. Both disciples fought contemporary ideas in order to gain the ruler's acceptance. Later on, during the Han Dynasty, Emperor Wu was impressed by these teachings, and when he came into power in 141 to 87 BC, he endorsed Confucianism as state ideology and orthodoxy and its official philosophy. The imperial state used Confucian values to help uphold the law, order, and status quo that effectively pulled the society out of chaos and turmoil. This state philosophy inevitably changed everything in China, from education and government to public and private attitudes. In traditional China, emperors promoted village talks on Confucian moral principles and teachings and published morality books promoting Confucian values. Confucian philosophy proposed a system of secular, social, and ethical philosophy based on principles of practical wisdom, good conduct, and appropriate social relationships and values. To put the world in order, we must first put the nation in order. To put the nation in order, we must first put the family in order. To put the family in order, we must first cultivate our personal life. We must first set our hearts right, as quoted by Confucius. Confucianism influenced Chinese and other Asian countries' attitudes towards life, set the standards of ideal living, and provided the stability for Chinese political theories and institutions for 2 millennia. It defined a set of morals based on 5 merits: benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and truthfulness, in order to restore primary set values and norms within a community, coupled with humanity and harmonious living. Confucius' ideas were not accepted during his lifetime, but later shaped moral thought, social relationships, and influenced the Chinese attitude, where later Korea, Japan, and Vietnam's interest grew. The people of China accepted Confucius' teachings for their sound principles. Around the same time Confucius' humanistic and ethical teachings were spreading across China, Taoism, developed by Lao Tzu a few decades earlier, was receiving more attention. Although there is little evidence to suggest that Lao Tzu did in fact live during the suggested time between 604 and 570 BC, as some believe he was a mythical religious figure. However, if he did exist, it is suggested that he was a librarian in the emperor's library during the Eastern Zhou dynasty, whose culture was heavily influenced by shamanism. Shamanic values were about the understanding of nature and harmonizing of nature. Lao Tzu believed that the way to restore peace and harmony to a fractured society was to be an active member of society and to apply Tao principles to everyday life, including government. Lao Tzu believed in certain ethics, such as the way to happiness was to learn to go with the flow of things. He also had ideas of plants and animals and peoples all sharing a universal life force, along with the beliefs of yin and yang. These ideas and beliefs were written in a book called the Tao Te Ching. Being and non-being create each other, difficult and easy support each other, long and short define each other, high and low depend on each other, before and after follow each other. This was a quote from the Tao Te Ching. Lao Tzu's disciple Chuang Tzu, who was around from 369 to 286 BC, continued Lao Tzu's work by popularizing Lao Tzu's philosophy like Mencius did with the Confucius, and wrote around 33 books. Taoism is an ancient tradition of Eastern religious belief and philosophy or way of life that is entrenched in Chinese customs. Taoism came about with no beginning and is based on one of several philosophical constructs of right and wrong, light and dark, knowledge and truth, that is called the Tao, which means the way, or the path. The Tao is the ultimate creative principle of the universe, where all things are united in the Tao. Taoism is about going with the flow of things, doing things in a natural and simple way. Taoism beliefs constitute a religion of unity and opposites, where they uphold the idea that everything in the universe, such as plants, animals, and people, share a universal life force, where there are two sides of the life force that are still entwined, one being yin, the dark female side linked to the moon, and the other yang, the light male side linked with the sun. It is important to have a balance of the two, as everyone should have some yin and yang in them. The principle of yin and yang views the world as being filled with complementary forces such as action and non-action, hot and cold, light and dark, etc. Taoism upholds the principles of living in harmony with people and nature, pursuing spiritual immortality, being virtuous and achieving self-development. Taoism was against rules and saw that it was wrong for governments and people to make numerous rules and laws about how people should behave. Taoism supported the view that people should make their own decisions. Taoism intends to entrust a harmonious way to live and to relate to oneself, nature and others, and the universe. Taoism emphasizes control but not dominance, fluidity but not ambivalence, and mystery but not confusion. The question of how did Confucianism and Taoism guide ancient China out of the chaos has basically already been answered. For in their state of turmoil and unrest, the people of ancient China looked towards the schools of thought where they could find an alternative way to look at life and live as a proper society. Confucianism fits this ideal way of life, and its principles and teachings have been used in everyday life to keep the Chinese society in harmony. The peaceful ways of Confucianism pulled this chaotic and crumbling empire out of devastation and united it. Not only did Taoism and Confucianism initiate a sense of order and a policy for life, they also helped establish the power of intellectualism and provided the foundation for a more sophisticated society. Belief in one philosophy did not disqualify belief in the other, but Taoism and Confucianism did in fact complement each other. Confucianism and Taoism have guided a peaceful Chinese society for 2,000 years, and up till 50 years ago, before the Communist Revolution, Taoism was one of the strongest religions in China. In 1949, a campaign was launched to destroy non-communist religion, along with Cultural Revolution from 1966 to 1976. Taoists from then on were wrongly mistreated in China, and their numbers significantly reduced. However, some religious tolerance and freedom has been restored over the last 3 decades, where Taoism and Confucianism have experienced some resurgence. These philosophies recur and are continuously reaffirmed throughout Chinese history, as the Chinese society fall back on Confucian and Taoism principles when the society suffers disruption. Therefore, these two religious philosophies were the light within the chaos, because they both provided a practical and ethical moral framework to help China transcend the chaotic turmoil that plagued it for centuries. These philosophies have continued to exert a peaceful and harmonious influence on Chinese society, and such is the nature of their intrinsic wisdom that even the advent of communism has not managed to usurp their role as core elements of Chinese civilization. Our greatest glory is not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. Confucius.